deep. You're Ken Kell. You're the hockey guy. I go, I don't know anything about this guy.
This is The Conversation Line, presented by Fieger Law.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Conversation Line, brought to you by Fieger Law. I'm Daniella Bruce, alongside the Red Wings radio play-by-play announcer Ken Kell. And joining us today, Assistant General Manager and Director of Amateur Scouting for your Red Wings, Kris Draper. Drapes, I feel like I've been trying to get you on this podcast for a long time, so thank you for finally joining
I got
us.
a nice little couple days at home, and this worked out perfect, and glad to be here with both of you. So thank you very much for having me.
Do you travel more now than when you did as a player?
Oh, Ken, it's not even close. Yeah, it's not even close. Yeah, Delta miles and Bonvoy points. That's what I'm all about these days.
Well, that is a good perk, right? If there is one perk to traveling all the time, it's that you rack up some points.
Unfortunately, I don't benefit from those perks. It kind of goes right to the family.
Well, that's good too.
It is good, yeah. So it's, you know what? There's a lot of travel, a lot of nights on the road, but it can be rewarding when you see the young players starting to come through the system, and especially at this time of year that some are stepping up and contributing. So that's the satisfaction of being on the road and doing what I do.
So what's the focus for you this time of year? Because I know that you're obviously scouting for drafts or future drafts. You're checking in on prospects. Like, what does the focus in March?
Yeah, well, last night I was dialed into watching us battle out with the Senators. What a hockey game! I thought our guys responded so well. It was competitive hockey game. It was a fast hockey game. That second period was unreal how they played, and obviously very disappointing outcome at the end. But they played so hard. For me, it's this is kind of a tough time of year because now you kind of have the moving targets of where we might pick. So it's a ever-changing schedule. A lot of these prospects are, the college prospects are obviously into the playoffs right now. So if there's a draft eligible, I got to make sure, they might lose out on a weekend. I got to try to pop in. For instance, I went and saw Wisconsin play. I had to check in on a prospect there. On the upcoming weekend, Arizona State, there's a prospects that's...
Pause for 1 second. We got away from the beginning of the podcast of the fire alarms going off. I promise we're safe. That's the only thing I want to let our viewers know. You're going to hear some fire alarms going off. They're testing the systems at LCA today. All right, continue.
Yeah. So I'll head out to Arizona State to make sure I get a look at, a prospect that plays there. So really now it's just, kind of, looking at the schedule, looking at teams, in the playoffs that are they going to make the playoffs? Are they not? And then it's about going out and getting, some last looks on some prospects for the upcoming draft. And then from there, there's 2 weeks left in the CHL season. Then obviously continue to watch college hockey. And then, when the playoffs start, redo my schedule and, start looking for, at the series and who might go where. So the luxury is, being in Detroit, it's there's a lot of hockey around the area that I still have to see, which is important. And then wherever I have to get to, it's, pretty easy of jumping on a plane at Detroit. And the TSA agents have become my friends. It's sometimes I feel like Norm from Cheers when I wheel in there. It's like, hey, Drapes, where are you off to this time?
Do you get special treatment now, too? They're to the front of the line, Drapes.
I pretty well have everything that you can get, from TSA to digital ID to Nexus to Clear. All the perks to try to get through security as fast as possible. But it's, and I don't only say it, there's, obviously people that do what I do and in the industry, just very complimentary of how good Detroit airport is.
That's right.
Chris, you deal with a lot of young players. Several years ago, you were a young player too. Have the players changed at all, or can you relate to when you were young to how they are right now?
They've changed. Yeah. You know the answer to that. You've been around just as long as I have.
I had to ask.
You know what? Honestly, the one thing you see is the skill level. Is just these. And they're almost fearless with the skill level that they have. From the way they play, the creativity they have with the puck. And then from there, just honestly, like the benefits and what is there for them at such a young age. You talk to a lot of these, prospects, and they're, 17, 18 years old, and, they've already had, 2-3 years of, skating coaches, skill coaches. They understand nutrition, things like that. Like we went through, especially, obviously my era and my generation, the post-game meals were, Les would wheel up about a dozen pizzas, and there'd be a cooler of beer for our good friend Larry Murphy, and away he'd go, and that was our post-game nutrition, so a lot of that has changed that way, and you walk downstairs and you see the advantages that, the players have right now with, the way that they eat, when they eat, how they eat, the importance of all of that, the importance of sleep, the importance of rest, still of getting into the gym. And when you get into the gym, the technology that they have, that's something that I would really, I would have loved that, we had a really, really hardworking team and guys that went into the gym, but nothing was monitored. No one was watching us. We just kind of went in there because we knew we had to do it. We knew it was good for us. And it would have been, very interesting, to see the science behind the workouts and obviously the off ice stuff, and even on ice of how they train and the length of practices and things like that. So I would say, when you go and look at these players, the one thing that's going to pop out is obviously, just how talented a lot of them are, fearless to use the skill that they have. I think that the skating has really come, and the skating has changed. You hear a lot of people, talk about edge work now and all that. For us, it wasn't like that. It was, you could go fast, you play fast, and that was it. And, so I would say that just the technology of how everything has changed in everyday life, the technology, in our sport has certainly changed. And, for me, I get to watch these prospects at, 16, 17, 18 years old and watch them and just can be impressed with, some of the things that these young players can do.
I feel like you had plenty of science, because I know one of your favorite workouts is the sauna and the bike, and you learned that from Chris Chelios. That's got to be some sort of science to that, right?
Well, they say the sauna is good for you, so I listen on that. And Chelly, if Chelly brought science to me, I think I'm in trouble. I think that sums it up. But I still remember that day when all of a sudden, we did have our sauna, and next thing you know, we had. One of the guys that worked around the rink, and he's in there, and the sauna door's open, and you can hear some power tools going on. And we're like, what's going on with the sauna? And Chelly was putting a TV in the sauna, and I was like, this is fantastic. So now the bike goes in, and, you have the sauna ride, and there'd be even times when, someone else was on the bike and you were sitting in the sauna and you were still watching TV and watching all the hockey highlights. And, it's something that I like so much. I actually, built one in my house. So I have a sauna with a TV and a bike. That's where I did my pregame last night before puck drop. So it was great.
You know what? I remember when you were playing, and all of a sudden, you brought the ropes in, and then you brought the tires where you were, pushing the tires over. Like, how did that all come about? Because that was kind of the new wave technology of getting in shape, right?
Yeah. Like I said, the off-ice fitness and strength and conditioning program was something that, I took a lot of pride in. I knew I had to find something that was, going to help me get in the league, and more importantly for me, help me stay in the league. I had to find a competitive edge. I played with some of the greatest players that this organization had ever seen, but also in the National Hockey League. And I had to find something of how am I, going to stay, with this team and stay in this league. And the one thing I felt I could do is, with off-ice, fitness, it was really starting to come, but it certainly wasn't at the level that it's at right now. And so I would always just kind of go back home. I actually worked out with two brothers in my entire career, John and Peter Renzetti. Peter came down and worked with us for a couple of years when I retired. And it was always about getting, cutting edge, workouts. And then a local guy here, Mike Knight, who I still train with at Art of Strength. He was, I kind of walked into his gym and I saw all this stuff and I was, this is pretty cool. And started, flipping tires, and I had, the sledgehammers on the tires, and we were doing ropes and kettlebells. And I just kind of felt it was just a different training, not only physically, but also for my mind of instead of doing all the same stuff that I had done for so many years, and kind of incorporated, that kind of workout in with Olympic lifts and that type of training of the, of the squats, the deadlifts, the importance of hitting those major muscles with, some of the stuff that Mike Knight did. And then kind of introduced it to some of the guys on the team, and guys started getting into it. And there were times where we would literally go to Mike's gym in West Bloomfield, and there'd be, Yuri Hudler would be there, Dan Cleary would be there, Justin Abdelkader, Jimmy Howard, Mike Modano came in his year that he was working out, and we would come in and work out before practice out in West Bloomfield, and we'd make Yuri Hudler pick up protein pancakes for us, and we'd meet him at the rink, and then we'd all have breakfast together. And it was just, something that, I really enjoyed doing, and I think it was a big part of my longevity. I was able to play till, I was 40 years old, and I think a lot of that has to do with, kind of getting into that type of training. And I always wanted to come into shape and took a lot of pride. I wanted to be the best conditioned Red Wing that we had. And that was just a pride thing that I had. And it was a big part of me getting, to Detroit. And then more importantly, it was a big part of me, staying with Detroit. And, to this day, I still, train with Mike, when I'm in town. If it's 3-4 times a week, I'll do it. If I'm here for the whole week, I'll be there every day. And it's something that I love to do.
You talked about just having to find a way for you to stick in the NHL, going all the way back to the trade from Winnipeg to Detroit for $1. One of your best quotes is, "If I can't make the team in Winnipeg, how am I going to make the team in Detroit?" Right? Yeah. Just what do you remember about that time specifically, joining a Red Wings team that was poised to go on to win Stanley Cups?
Well, my first training camp was real short. I remember that. I remember we were out in... we stayed out at, I think it was the Hyatt Regency in Dearborn, right off Michigan Ave, right? I think that's what it was. And I just remember, that's where we stayed. We had training camp down here at the Joe, and went out, and they were actually talking about, we had a hard training camp. There was a 1.5 mile run. There was a wind gate test. There was a max VO2, and it was a pretty hard training camp, and bench press and pull-ups and whatever it was. And I just remember, sitting there, and when they were talking about top 3 guys, my name came up in a lot of those categories. And the one event I remember, it was the 1.5 mile run, and it was Vladdy absolutely crushed it. I thought I was ready to go. Vladdy and Slava Kozlov, and then myself. We were the top 3 that ran the 1.5 mile. So that would have been training camp in '93. And just remember, I was like, man, this Vladdy, geez, he's like a gazelle out there, and you talk about a freak athlete, that's what Vladdy was. And so my first training camp, bless you, my first training camp, I went out, and, I accomplished kind of what I wanted to do. I made a name for myself in the off-ice categories, and really excited about, getting on the ice and kind of carrying that over. And literally, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 days, and then we were starting exhibition games, and I didn't get one exhibition game. They sent me down right away to Adirondack, and so I knew I was going to start my year in Adirondack. And I got to admit, that was tough. It was I felt I gave myself a tremendous opportunity, at least to play some exhibition games, and it didn't happen. I just remember I drove back to my house, and Newell Brown was a coach of Adirondack Red Wings at the time. And ironically enough, when I was, 15, 16 years old, Newell was recruiting me to Michigan State with Ron Mason. And we kind of created a bit of a relationship there. And I ended up, he's like, take a couple days, and we'll meet you down in Adirondack, and then, let's get this going. And I just remember getting down to Adirondack and just feeling that Newell Brown had a belief in me as a hockey player. And I went on, had an unreal first half, something that I hadn't done in previous years with the Winnipeg organization. And then I remember a game, and we were playing at Copps Coliseum in Hamilton, and came out after the game, and, my family were there, my friends were there, and I had a hat trick, and I was first star, and I was obviously, pretty proud of that. And then out of the corner of my eye, when I'm talking to my dad, I could see, Scotty Bowman, Ken Holland, and Brian Murray were all there, and I was like, "Ooh, they saw this. This is pretty good." And so Scotty kind of came over, and he had known my dad for years, kind of through the St. Mike's hockey and everything, and he started talking to my dad, and I'm kind of waiting like, Scotty, I had 3 tonight, like pretty good. And sure enough, the first thing he said, he's like, how many faceoffs did you win tonight? And back then they didn't keep that, especially in the American Hockey League. And I go, you know what? I don't know. I had a pretty good night in the circle, Scotty. Felt good about it. He goes, you were 19 of 22. Can you do that in the NHL? And I said, yes, Scotty, I can like this. And then he's like, we'll see you in a couple weeks. And so then he left and that was it. And I was like, does a couple weeks mean he's going to come watch me in Adirondack, or am I going to him in Detroit? And sure enough, I got called up on January 23rd, 1994, and played my first game the next day, January 24th, and never went back to the American Hockey League. So it's pretty neat how that all played out.
I have to remind you that I'll never forget your NHL debut day, because that is the day I was born, January 24th, 1994.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's the
Isn't
connection
that great?
right there.
That's it. That's it.
You know what, Drapes? I'm a half empty, glass half empty kind of guy. So I have to go
boy.
back to the run. You were in the top 3, but who were in the bottom 3? That's what I want to know. Who were the guys that
who didn't?
tailed? Yeah, who weren't very good at the run?
Well, I'll sue her. I of course I'm going to say Darren McCarty. If we were running, Mac wasn't running fast, but he certainly did other things at training camp to make a name for himself. That's for sure. And it was. So I would have to say that, one of the slowest guys that I played with was D-Max. So anytime I can get a little rip at him, I'm doing it.
Hey, everybody has their skill sets,
What
right?
about
His
Ozzy?
was
What
different.
about Ozzy? Was he in there too?
Ozzy was so quiet, he probably didn't even do it and no one noticed. That would be Ozzy back in the day. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, you go on to have a great NHL career, right? I want to ask you this question because I always find it interesting. When did you realize, okay, I'm getting towards the end of my career, I see a future in the front office? Did you ever think it was coaching, or how did you come to the decision to continue your career in this fashion?
You know what? I did think about coaching. And to this day, I love watching the game and just, of how it's played, and, especially on the specialty teams, watching power play, watching penalty kill, love watching, the systems of the game. I still think I feel like I am a student of the game when I watch it. There was some thought about getting into coaching, but the one thing that, when I retired at 40, the one thing that I had an opportunity to do was to coach my son. Mm-hmm. And I knew if I got into coaching right away, I know how hard coaches work. I know the hours that they work, about, getting up in the morning and being there, and obviously going through the day and then the games. And, so that was going to take away from the opportunity to coach my son, Keenan. So then I talked to Ken, and he kind of brought me in the front office as, kind of like the assistant to the GM. And he kind of said, he goes, you can coach, you can do player development, or you can scout, is kind of really, these are the areas that, are there for you. And so I just kind of, with all the hockey that we mentioned that's around here, I just kind of started going to games, and I would go watch the Detroit Red Wings play. I would go up to Grand Rapids, watch Grand Rapids play, and watch, our prospects and our players up there. And then just kind of started seeing some draft eligibles play, of going to watch the development program, and, all the OHL hockey that's here, Saginaw, Flint, Windsor, Sarnia, you name it. You get into, Canada, London, Kitchener. It's all very easy to get to. And I just kind of started scouting, and I just kind of started gravitating, towards that. So, and I was in a good area for our organization to do that, and just started watching, games. And then as, things kind of started, I was able to coach Keenan, I was able to scout. And as Keenan was kind of aging out, playing for Little Caesars, which was a blast, coaching, all those kids for, I think it was 6 years. I had, so much fun with those guys. It was a blast going to the rink every day. And some of them, Carter Mazer, who obviously I coached for, I think it was 5 years, and, the unfortunate, but obviously super proud of seeing him make his NHL debut. Victor Mancini played, for us at U16, obviously played in New York, and watching that. And then a lot of college kids, are still playing NCAA college. Just, Keenan's up at Michigan, and two of his teammates, Jacob Truscott and Mark Estapa, are guys that coached all the way through, and watching them at Michigan has, been pretty proud. And, as they kind of aged out and the transition within the Detroit Red Wing organization of obviously, Stevie coming in and taking over as general manager, he kind of sat me down and said, what position, would you like? These are the ones that are open. And because I had kind of been in the amateur side of the game, I said, I'd like to, be a part of running the draft. And he said, well, he goes, you're not going to be a part of it. You're going to run the draft. You're going to be, if that's what you want to do, you're going to be director of amateur scouting. And he gave me that title and that opportunity, something that I take a lot of, pride in. And, our first 2 drafts together were, Moritz Seider, obviously, that we took, and Lucas Raymond in their first year pro. Both of them, were up for Rookie of the Year, something that obviously we're really proud of. And seeing where they're at right now, just, unreal hockey players and probably, as important or more important, unbelievable, people as well. And then, I think 3 years into that, then he brought me into his office. I wasn't quite sure how this conversation was going to go. I'm kind of like thinking we're doing a pretty good job in the draft and things are okay. And then, he talked about, promoting me to assistant general manager, something that, I was obviously took a lot of pride in, that, Stevie was, acknowledging what I've been doing and the sacrifices that I've been doing for this organization. And, he knows how much this organization means to me. And it's, so when we start talking about, the travel and what I do, it's a big sacrifice. I know that, he knows that, but the importance of getting us back to where we want to go is something that is very important through the draft and the development. And I've said this before from, the drafting part of it, and then on the development side with Dan Cleary and Nicholas Cronwell, that, we have the best development staff in the NHL. And that's, I think we give them, prospects to work with, and then they take it and just run. And I think it's been great watching, the way they develop our prospects, and obviously, a great working relationship with both, Dan Cleary and Nicholas Cronwell, who I was able to play a lot of hockey with too. And obviously we all share the same passion about getting the Detroit Red Wings back to where they want to be and where we want them to be.
Kris, when you look at the championship years, the Stanley Cup years here in Detroit, everyone talks about Steve Yzerman and Brendan Shanahan, Sergei Fedorov, the Russian Five. But your group, the Grind Line, you, McCarty, Koser at one point, Kirk Malpe, you guys were special in that Scotty trusted you guys, right, to go against the other team's top lines, and that kind of freed up everybody else, didn't it?
Yeah. I obviously it's pretty special when you're in the trust of someone like Scotty Bowman. It's not easy to do. And it was, it was something that we took a lot of pride in. Obviously, originally the Grind Line, I know Mac didn't want to be a part of the Grind Line until we got a t-shirt. And then he's like, I have to be on the t-shirt. Because he was playing with Stevie,
right.
And so then all of a sudden it's like it was Joey Koser on the right, Maltz on the left, and then myself at center, and then all of a sudden the Grind Line kind of, people were kind of giving some acknowledgments to the Grind Line, and then DRW Merchandise wanted to do a T-shirt, and somehow Mac ended up on this T-shirt.
But wait, you're playing on the top line.
Wait a second here, So it was we always kind of joke about that of how Mac kind of was like kind of looked down on us a little bit until the Grind Line was kind of getting some love and getting some merch, and Mac had to be a part of that. Next thing you know, he's the biggest fan of the Grind Line. But the trust factor was something that old school. We earned it. It wasn't something that was given to us. And I think, when the names that you mention, if we could, free them up, especially at home when we had last change, and if Scotty wanted to match us up, if you just think of the teams that, St. Louis, Colorado, Dallas, what those teams had, and all of a sudden, if we could go out and play against a Forsberg, against a Sakic, and kind of, limit them a little bit. Some nights we obviously chipped in offensively and freed up, the Yzermans, the Fedorovs, the Shanahans, the Larionovs, their line to be able to do their thing. That's what made us, so tough to beat, is the fact that, we took a lot of pride in how we played in our own end, but we also had, the confidence in ourselves and in each other that we could chip in with some goals. And, there were some nights, obviously, the hat trick that Mac got against Colorado is something, you just never forget. Some big goals that, you think of the Stanley Cup Finals in '97. Maltz and I go down on a 2-on-0. We score the shorthanded goal to, kind of get us going. Joey Koser, incredible goal, that little backhand shelf, for a goal there. So we were able to chip in with those, in those big moments and loved it, and took a lot of pride in doing that. For game one, everyone was talking about, playing against, the Legion of Doom and the Philadelphia Flyers and who was going to do what. And everyone was, talking about, Vladdy and Fetisov going against Lindros's line. And then was it going to be Sergei or was it going to be Stevie? It's going to be a combination of both. And sure enough, Scotty starts us with Murph and Swede. And, and then, obviously away we go from there. So, I remember just sitting in that tunnel and just, everyone's kind of getting introduced and everything. And the starters stayed back. And you're just sitting there thinking like, starting game one of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight against the Philadelphia Flyers, it was, pretty special, from everything that we talked about from the early days, in my career, from how it didn't work out with Winnipeg to the start of what it went to Detroit to 3-4 years later, playing with, Mac and Maltz on the grind line and starting game one of the finals and being a part of winning that, first Stanley Cup that, the Red Wing organization, we certainly needed it, and the city and the state of Michigan certainly needed it.
Okay, all of that great info, such a great answer, and I want to know one thing.
Okay.
Do you still have the Grind Line T-shirt?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you know how much that would
Vintage.
probably be worth? I
Yeah.
might want to get that from you.
We can discuss. And they've come out with some new ones too, which is kind of cool. But the original Grind Lines, it was funny, like cleaning out my basement last summer and kind of like looking around at I found some like classic stuff. And Keenan wanted to take some stuff up to Michigan, and Kennedy wanted to take some stuff to New York. And I'm kind of like, you know what, this is just going to stay here because I certainly know what's going to happen in Michigan.
Yeah.
And, but it was pretty classic to give, we had some real good throwback stuff of, some zippies that we had, some sweatsuits that we had, stuff that I totally forgot that we had. So I do have the original Grind Line T-shirts. Yeah.
Any sticks or anything like that you kept? Like did you use a stick in the Stanley Cup final that you might have kept because that was a big part of your career?
Yeah. You know what? I kept a lot of stuff, and I got a lot of stuff signed through '97 and on the back-to-back years. Especially jerseys, game use sticks from Stevie, Sergei, Swede, Shanny, like all those guys. Like I got a lot of stuff collected over the years, and obviously some pretty special stuff of whether it's jerseys and sticks. But in '08, I have all my sticks that I used through the Stanley Cup Finals. Pretty special. My daughter Cameron was born 2 days before game one. So I ended up, I had the initials of, all three of my kids, and have those sticks in the basement. So all the sticks that I used for the 6 games are all collector's items.
The next podcast we do with you is going to be from your basement, and we're just going to look at all
Sure.
the,
Yeah, we can
I
do
love
that.
that. I'm churning. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You probably have so much cool stuff.
Yeah. Some stuff from, it was obviously watching the Four Nations. Incredible hockey, first off. Like that turned, average hockey fans into avid hockey fans, which was incredible hockey. But, I was able to play in the World Cup in 2004. And Mario Lemieux was on that team, and I have a signed stick from Mario and some jerseys that we wore there, and so some pretty special stuff that I had. And as I was kind of going through my career, I just kind of thought it would be cool to start collecting some sticks from players that I thought were going to be, or were going to be Hall of Famers in a collection. So I probably have probably 100 sticks of Hall of Famers that some that I played with in Team Canada and certainly played against. So pretty special collection.
Kris, thinking back now, we're approaching almost 30 years since you guys won the Cup in 1997. I mean, does it seem like it was that long ago, or does it seem like just a blip?
Well, when I get up, I'm going to feel like it was 30 years ago.
He's actually stuck in this chair. This podcast may never
But it
end.
goes by quick, right?
Pump this up, right, to get out. I'll feel it that way. But honestly, like, man, Ken, it so fast.
Yeah.
You know, and just you know, obviously very fortunate to be able to sit here and to talk, you know, to the both of you about, you know, the great memories and you know, the accomplishments that I was very fortunate to be a part of. You know, it's, you know, the 97 year was, you know, so special, especially with what happened, you know, from 94, you know, losing to San Jose in 7, the disappointment of that. 95 was, I mean, it was a shortened season, but we absolutely dominated the shortened season and went through playoffs. And then obviously, you know, it just ends up getting, you know, swept by, you know, New Jersey in the finals. That was just, you know, within a week it's over and you're just absolutely devastated of how that happened and everything that, you know, went on in 96 and, you know, and then, you know, everything that, you know, kind of turned around for us in 97 and, you know, from 97, 98, and then again, winning the cup, you know, in 02, you know, pretty special times around here to be Detroit Red Wing and, you know, especially the players that I was able to play with, something that, you know, that's winning is something, but winning with those guys is you take a lot of pride in that. And you kind of, you know, you look around and that 02 team, you know, absolutely incredible to be a part of that, you know, with those guys and, you know, some real special memories that we were able to have.
Well, we're hoping for some new ones very soon. And then you guys are doing your diligence together to make that happen here in Detroit. And we appreciate your time joining us on the podcast today.
Daniella, Ken, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Next one in the basement. With all the
I'll set it
memorabilia.
up. You got it. Yeah. There'll be no fire alarm for that one. Right?